Greetings, Matt. While you do make some really good points in your video, I think we should look at the context a bit more closely. Now, you do mention that longswords were used in different contexts, like Hauptschwert, civilian use, then we have the judicial duels as well. I think that we should look at the swords as having a specific purpose, not just different types of swords, but in longsword types as well. So if you want to have a civilian longsword, then as you said, it'll be something like the Albion, I think it's the Albion Ringek that you showed us, which is around 115 centimeters with around a 25 centimeter handle, which is nice and maneuverable, yet isn't so big as to really interfere with your everyday life if you carry it on the belt. Now, on the other hand, if you have something like a 135 centimeter sword, that will really interfere. However, it is more effective and some techniques are much more easily done with a longer handle, and of course a longer blade also helps with the reach and everything. So I think that we should take a look at what we're doing, because we're basically studying the manuscripts, which are one-on-one duels, and we're doing one-on-one duels as well. So we should take a look at mostly the judicial duel and try to guess what kind of swords the judicial duel would use. And I think they would use a bit longer swords with longer handles because it doesn't interfere with anything, because it's used so rarely and only on specific occasions. So if we take a look at the manuscripts, we actually see that often the swords are much bigger and differently proportioned from those we find in excavations, from the original longswords basically. And if we take a look at certain manuscripts, we can see unarmored fighting on one side and armor fighting on the other side. Now, if you take a look at these two pictures, you'll notice that the unarmored side seems to have a much longer handle and bigger swords, while the armored side has shorter handle, and sometimes there are actually pommels that you can't grip because they have spikes coming out of them. So they weren't really meant to be that long in handle, because if you use them in Hauptschwert, you really didn't need such a long handle. Of course, having a handle where you can put two hands on did help fighting. This is speculation, of course, but I would guess that it did help fighting any unarmored opponents you might have met, and it did help in hooking as well. Especially if you have the big wheel pommels, it hooks really nicely behind the wrist or in the neck or whatever you're doing. And if you have a spike, that spike can also help a bit with the hooking. So I think these are different swords that we're using, and the ones we're actually using, like mine is 130 centimeters with a 30 centimeter handle. I think that's good, because I would wager that in judicial duels, which is the closest to what we're actually doing, they used similar swords. Perhaps a little bit shorter, but thereabouts. So thank you for listening, tell me your thoughts, and have fun!